All right, you guys, as you can see by the thumbnail, I'm back with another one like the other one. And this one's going to be a little bit different. So let me explain this video to you guys so you guys understand what's happening here. So the name of this story is called Death Rattle, and you'll understand once you listen to the videos and once you hear the story. But I think it's befitting based on the circumstances of this story and how this played out. So anyways, as you guys know, I get phone calls from viewers that a lot of the times they have family members that are locked up, or somebody will reach out to them that they know that wants to put their story out, and they'll reach out to me the same way they do to other YouTube channels. So yesterday, an individual by the name of Anthony Rodriguez, he goes by the name Kill Kill, he reached out to me, and his whole purpose was to tell his story in his words. And most of you are probably familiar with this story. You've probably seen it on the news. You've seen it on other YouTube channels. I think I might have even ran something short on it. I'm not sure. But this was an incident that happened in New Folsom. There was actual video footage that was played on other YouTube channels that I seen myself. There were clips of it on the news, and it was a graphic video. So the video that I'm referring to shows two individuals slip their cuffs. One of them ran up the stairs, grabbed weapons from somebody that slid him under the door. Then he runs back down the stairs. He hands his partner a weapon, and then they commence to stabbing this other guy that was sitting there in chains, shackles, belly chains, and he couldn't defend himself. So this is the individual that reached out to me. He told me the story in graphic detail. And so the reason why I wanted to do this video first before I release the actual interview that I did with this guy is because I'm going to be honest with you guys. A lot of the times when these guys call from prison, the audio isn't the greatest. Sometimes the calls drop. There's a lot of lag time. Sometimes you can barely hear them, and it's just the audio is real bad. So I'm basically going to give you guys the version that he told me when I interviewed him on the phone. And then I'm going to release the video where he's telling it in his own words himself. So here's a little bit of backstory about this incident that I believe wasn't ever mentioned on any other YouTube channel. I don't believe that any news coverage mentioned any of these explicit details. This came from this individual himself, and these are the intimate details that you're only going to hear coming from somebody that was actually there. So again, this individual, Anthony Rodriguez, who goes by the name Kill Kill from El Monte 13. So he calls me and he tells me, he's like, hey Boxer, he's like, I got your hookup from my primo that, reached out to you through your email. And, the whole purpose of him reaching out was because I wanted to tell my story. So anytime somebody calls me and they want to put their story out, one of the first things I always ask them is, how do you want to do it? Do you want to put it in your own words? Do you want to put it out there yourself? Or do you want me to put it out there and remain anonymous? His thing was, you know what? I'd rather just put it out there myself. It's been out there. It was all over the news. It's not a secret. Everybody knows what happened. So I would rather just put it in my words. So that's what I did. I allowed him to tell his story in his words. However, again, like I said, the video is choppy. Some of it you can hear, some of it's hard to hear, and then there's lag time. So I'm just going to go over the gist of it and cover some of the things that you guys might not be able to hear or might not understand him saying when he's telling you himself. So before we got into the story, I asked this individual, has he ever done time before? And, when he was out there on the main lines, who he ran with and all that kind of stuff. I like to try to get as detailed as I can. But at the same time, I also told him, I don't want you to say anything that's going to incriminate you. I don't want you to put your story out there if it's going to hurt you in any kind of way as far as legally. So if you say something and then you decide that you want that taken out, just let me know, because when I'm done with the interview, I'm going to edit the video. I'll take it out, but you got to let me know. So he was on board with that and he understood. Now, from what I remember him telling me, he's in his 40s and he's the type of individual that has always been non-confrontational. He just does his time, minds his own business, and he done most of his time in the shoot programs. And obviously, if he's done time in the shoot program, he had to have been out there in the mix on some level. So when he said that he stuck to himself and that he was, non-confrontational and he was a quiet individual, I think he meant he stayed out of the politics. So as you guys know, this incident, it happened in New Folsom on B Yard. And for those of you that seen footage of the actual video that was released, this was a part of Folsom on B Yard that was being used as the shoot program. And apparently, from what this guy told me, is that there were active individuals on that yard, on B Yard at that time. A lot of the yard were dropouts, guys that had went to the other side. However, he said the Africanos that were on that yard were the ones that were still active. Now, the day room setup, this is what I asked him about. What was the purpose of you guys being out in the day room? Why were you guys out there? Were you doing legal work? Was this some kind of social time? Why did they let you guys out there? Because I don't remember them ever doing anything like that when I went to prison. The day room was for programming. There was no tables out there where they allowed you to come out there and sit at a table while they had you chained. But according to him, this was rec time. This was time that they were allowed to come out there and sit at the tables and basically just sit there and talk or do whatever they wanted to do during whatever amount of time they allowed them to stay out there. So apparently before this incident happened where this individual got his life taken, there was another incident that happened with an Africano that was, according to Kill, this Africano was real disrespectful on the tier. He was snagging lines. He was being a cell soldier. He was just disrespecting people on the tier. And because of that disrespect, I guess Kill and his boy Monster had made plans to try to get out in the day room with this Africano so that they could stab him. And that's what they did. I don't remember how long it happened before the main incident, but from what I recall, it was like within a few weeks. It was fairly recent. So apparently they get put out in the day room with this Africano and they had plastic pieces. So, stabbing somebody with a piece of plastic, unless you get a good eye shot or you got some real heavy duty plastic and you got some nasty points on them, you're really not going to murk nobody with plastic. You can put a bunch of holes in them, but you're not going to murk them. So this incident takes place with the Africano. They hit him in the day room the same way with these plastic pieces, but they don't move him. I believe they probably moved the Africano. So Kill and his boy Monster from Chiques that participated in the main incident, they stayed there after that incident. They never moved him. So after the incident with the Africano, I guess what ended up happening is when they were out there in the day room on rec time on a different day, apparently Monster and Kill were out there. And I guess Kill had written his name out there on the table somewhere. And there was an individual by the name of Rascal that wrote his name over his name. He struck him out. And I don't have to educate you guys on this stuff. You guys know how it is. When gang members write their names on walls and they strike up their hoods, this is a way for them to represent themselves. This is how gangs communicate with each other. And when somebody writes their name somewhere on a table, on a wall somewhere, and somebody else comes over there and they strike them out, that's a form of blatant disrespect. When you cross somebody out, you strike your name over them and you put your hood, and that's what ended up happening in this situation. This guy, Anthony Rodriguez, or Kill, he finds out that this guy wrote his name over his name, and Monster, his boy, he kind of instigates the situation by telling him, hey, this dude, he struck you out, man. He's like, you're not gonna do nothing about it. And at first, this guy Kill said, you know what, man, I'm not gonna trip on it. Getting ready to go home. I believe he said he had like 4 years or something like that. So he's short to the house, and I don't know, they started talking about it, because from what I gathered from him is that there were some older guys that were there with him that took a liking to him. And these guys, they're all DOs. They're all, on the other side. And some of these older guys, they were lifers, and they were telling them, youngster, go home. You're short to the house. This ain't worth it. This is stupid shit. Don't trip on it, man. If anything, we'll get somebody else to deal with this individual, but just go home. But according to Kill, he said that night he went back to his cell and he thought about it, and he said something kept telling him that, he had to murk this individual, that he wasn't going to allow him to get away with that disrespect. And apparently everybody in that building, they knew about it, and that only exasperated the issue with him. He felt like he had to step up and represent himself. So, he was on the fence that night. He kept on debating on whether or not he should go after this individual or whether he should let it go. And ultimately, he said he woke up that morning and he said, you know what, something told me you got to murk this dude. So from that point on, he started making plans to whack this guy. Now, this guy Rascal, I don't remember where he was from, but he did identify him as being a possible 2-5er. And he was on the tier with them, and he never confronted him about crossing his name out. He never gave him any reason to believe that there was any kind of conflict between the two. So as far as he was concerned, there was no issue between them. But he had to figure out a way how to get this individual out in the day room, and this guy never came out to program. So what this individual Kill did is he got at Monster and he told him, look, I already made my mind up. I'm gonna whack this dude. He's like, if you want to come with me, it's all good. If you don't, I'm not tripping. But I'm going. Either way, I'm gonna get my money. I need to get this dude. So Monster ends up telling him, he's like, you know what? I'm gonna ride with you. He's like, you're my boy. I wish you wouldn't. I wish you just go home. But if that's what you're gonna do, he's like, I'm gonna go with you. So according to Kill, he was thinking about contingencies. I don't know why he thought about this stuff before, he actually made his piece, but he had told Monster that, in the course of whacking this dude, if his piece breaks, he was gonna tell him, hey, my piece broke, give me your piece, and then I'll take it from there. And that's what ended up happening. So the other thing that Kill says in this interview is that, he didn't want this to be the same type of situation with the Africano. That, they ended up plugging the Africano, they stabbed him a bunch of times with plastic. But again, all they really did was draw blood. And this guy apparently, he was out to get a body. And that was his objective. So I believe in some of the other YouTube videos that were put out about this story, they talked about, these guys doing a mock run, that they came out and did a practice run before they did the actual stabbing. And, he confirmed this. So that was good information. He said, yeah, we actually came out and, we had handcuff keys that were improvised handcuff keys, meaning that these guys made their own handcuff keys and they were easy. There's two kinds of handcuff keys that you make. The kind where you use something to release the slider, or where you make an improvised handcuff key and you use it to open up the actual locking mechanism. And according to Kill, he said that they made handcuff keys out of radios that they used to give them. They opened up the radios and they used handcuff keys. Now, the other thing I forgot to mention too is that the piece of plastic, the plastic that they used to hit the Africano, I know I'm jumping back and forth, but I want to make sure you guys understand all this. But the plastic that they used to hit the Africano came from a broken TV. Apparently there was a J-Cat, they paid him to break his TV, and then he slid back some weapon stock, some pieces of plastic. And that's what they used to hit the Africano. But like I said, when Kill made up his mind that he was gonna get Rascal, he said he made up his mind that he was gonna murk this dude, and that he knew he had to use steel. So Kill said that when he made up his mind that he was gonna whack Rascal, that he didn't want to use plastic, and that, he knew he had to find some steel. So he gets to this boy Monster, and apparently they both had a nail. And he said all night he worked on his locker and Monster worked on his table or whatever. They worked on a piece of steel in the cell with that nail. And it's a tedious process to take a nail and to basically what you're doing is you're outlining the piece of steel that you want to cut out of a table or out of the bed or one of the lockers, and you can just keep tracing the outline of that piece that you're trying to cut out. You're making a groove, and you're just making that groove deeper and deeper until finally you can get it to where it pops off, where it breaks off. But it's a long process. Trust me, you got guys that will be doing that shit all night until their fingers bleed, their fingernails are falling off and shit. So he said that, they worked on them all night and they managed to get good pieces of steel. So from that point on, they were ready. I know that there was some speculation about whether or not he was set up or whether these guys got help from some of the COs that were working there in New Folsom. I'm not going to get into the specifics or the details about it. I'm going to let you guys hear what he says about that in the actual recording. But when you hear it, it's mind-blowing. It's crazy. These types of things happen in prison all the time. I don't know if this happened in this incident, but what I did ask him about that situation right there is that, usually when we have a rapport with some COs that are working in our housing units or in prison, in some of the blocks that we've been in, or gun tower officers that work in the gun tower, and we have that understanding with them, hey, we're gonna handle some business today, just giving you a heads up out of respect. It's a rapport. That's all it is. And a lot of the times, these guys, these officers that understand the politics, they'll be like, hey, you know what? If you guys are going to put some work in, cool. Just give me a heads up and I'll let you do your thing. But when I tell you, at 3 minutes, 4 minutes, when I tell you guys get down, just get down. Otherwise, somebody's gonna get shot. So I know firsthand myself that these types of things, they do happen. Whether or not it happened in this incident, I don't know. But again, you guys are gonna hear what he's got to say about that himself. So that night when they made their pieces, and they worked on their pieces all night, they put points on them, they put handles on them, they waited till the next day. And apparently, according to Kill, they ended up getting put out in the day room with this other individual. So the three of them are out there, and this other guy, he's oblivious to what's going on. This guy has no idea that there's some conflict. He doesn't know that Kill knows that he crossed him out, he struck him out. He doesn't know nothing about that. According to Kill told this guy that he needed him to come out to the day room as a form of support. I guess they weren't getting their phone calls, and these guys were complaining to the administration that they weren't getting their allotted phone time. So this guy used that as a ruse to get this other guy out there. He tells this other guy, Rascal, he's like, hey, are you gonna come out to the day room Wednesday with me and Monster? And Rascal apparently told him that he wasn't gonna come out. He never came out to the day room, but he said, I'll come out if you need me to come out. Why, what's up? And that's when he tells him, we need your support. They've been jacking us on phone time, and basically we want to get out there and we want to hold the day room hostage. They were gonna get out there and refuse to lock it up until they got an understanding about their phone time. So that was the ruse that got this guy Rascal out there. So when these guys were put in the day room, after they were chained and cuffed to the tables and the COs walked out, this is when I asked him, I'm like, I seen the video and it looked like the video was taken from somewhere where the tower was, where the cameras are posted somewhere up on the wall by where the tower was. They didn't have a clear vantage point to see you guys, while this whole incident was taking place. The tower wasn't watching you guys. And again, I'm gonna let him tell you what he said about that. But right there where they were sitting, the tower can see everything. So he says at one point he kind of looks over at his boy Monster, he gives him the nod and the wink, and that's the cue for them to come out of their cuffs. And apparently they had already let their boy upstairs know that they were going to come out, they were going to blast this guy, and that when they came up the stairs to his door, that to slide the two pieces out. So boom, he says him and Monster, they start working on their cuffs. He ends up popping his chains off first. He gets his shackles off, and not long after that, Monster, he gets his chains and his shackles off. Now, this is what's crazy about this. Apparently, Rascal had an improvised handcuff key himself. He sees these other two coming out of his cuffs, and he pulls his key out and he starts trying to come out of his as well, but his key wasn't working. He's sitting there messing around with his key and it wasn't working. I guess Rascal was under the impression that these guys were going to do something in the day room towards the administration, towards the COs. They were going to just run around in the building and act like fools or whatever they were going to do. But he had no idea that he was a target. Still at that point, he didn't know. For those of you that watched the video, if you remember, he ran up the stairs, he grabbed the two pieces. He said the whole time when I was coming down the stairs and I handed Monster his piece, this guy was smiling. Like he didn't have no idea what was happening until they were right up on him, and then that's when he figured it out. And by then, it was obviously too late. Monster, according to what he said, Monster was the first one to start plugging him. He started hitting him, and then they both start going to town on this guy. Now, I seen the video, and it's hard to see at one point. It's almost like they're out of view or you can't see what's going on. And it doesn't look like this guy fought back, but according to Kill, this guy was trying to fight back. He was doing what he could with chains on, which is probably not too much. He's probably just moving around trying to duck and weave, trying to dodge from getting stabbed, but he really couldn't do nothing. You can't do nothing with the chains on. I mean, the one thing he did say is that they had the kind of belly chains on that did have a lot of slack. So you could move your arms around a little bit, but when you got two dudes on you with pieces and they're stabbing you, there's not a whole lot you can do when you're cuffed up like that. So they're stabbing this guy, they're hitting him, and at some point the gunner starts shooting a Bertha. And if you remember the video, Monster, he gets hit with the Bertha. So again, if you guys remember the video, apparently Monster, he gets hit with the Bertha. He gets hit in the balls with the Bertha and he goes down. And then, from that point, he kind of jumps up and he's moving around a little bit. Well, in the meantime, while they're kind of out of view, Kill, he's still working on this dude. He's still hitting him. And that point is when this guy fell on his face. He fell off the stool and he fell on his face. And the way that he fell, because he was shackled to the table, he was basically stretched out where now his arms were between his legs, and he was kind of stretched out. His face was on the floor, and he was in a position where he couldn't move. So this gave this guy free reign to continue hitting him, and that's what he did. He said he kept stabbing him. He said he remembers when he was laying on his face that he just looked at that area on his back between his shoulder blades, and he started plugging them right there. He said, I knew that his heart was on that side, and that's the side I was aiming for. According to him, he said he buried his piece in this guy about 15 times until he stopped moving. At some point after that, he backs up, and then he sees a puddle of blood start to form under this guy. And he said, at that point I thought he was done. But what ended up happening is he flipped this guy, he grabbed him and he flipped him on his back so that now he's facing up. And he said when he did that, this guy made a sound that he said still haunts him to this day. And this is his words. He said this is a sound that he'll never forget. And he didn't know what to call it, but I told him what it was. It's called a death rattle. It's basically when you take your last breath, and a lot of people, they make a weird, a funny sound. It's between a moan and kind of like a groan, a moan. It's just a weird sound. If you've never heard it, it's kind of hard to describe. But he made a death rattle at the same time he was saying no or stop stabbing him. So at that point, he said he sat there and he watched this guy Rascal take his last breath. He knew from that point on he had died, he had passed. And he said he was sitting there, his boy Monster was already proned out, and he said he looked over towards the sally port, and he sees like 20 or 30 COs. They're all just standing there watching, and they basically watched him slaughter this individual. Again, those are his words. But he said that the reason why they did that is because, they had to follow their policies. And their policy is when there's an inmate that's stabbing another inmate and they see a weapon, that they can't enter that area until that inmate tosses his weapon. So after he knew this guy was done, he tossed his weapon, and that's when they came in there. And they took him out to the cages, and that's when the investigation started. So at this point, the investigation starts, but it's an ugly case. They had him on camera. Everybody seen what happened. It was all over the news. Plus, you had inmates that were in that unit that seen what had happened, and they were giving statements. So he knew he was done. He said, I was cooked, bro. I was pretty much done, and I knew I was going to get a life sentence. So for him, court was just going through the process. That's all it was. But he did say that some of the COs that were standing outside the Sally Port watching when this incident took place, some of those COs apparently told him that was one of the worst homicides that they had seen during the entire time that they worked, as a correctional officer. That it was graphic, and that they seen him take his life. So Kill and Monster, they both end up going to court. And again, they know they're done. And they knew that the DA was gunning for him. Apparently Kill was trying to work out some kind of deal to take some of the culpability off of Monster. But the DA wasn't going for it. The DA balked at it and was like, there's no deals on the table. These guys are getting stretched out. So Kill ended up taking 3 life sentences. He goes over the specifics, the details of it, and Monster, apparently he ends up getting 105 years, but he was already doing a life sentence, so it didn't matter. Anyways, I did ask this guy a few questions after he was done telling his story, some questions that I knew a lot of you probably would have wanted to ask yourselves. So, I asked him some questions like, did this guy say anything when he was getting stabbed? He said he never said a word. He never said a single word. The whole entire time when they were stabbing him, he just basically took it. The other thing I asked him about, was really about his opinion, was why they allowed these guys to continue coming out if they knew that these guys were more prone to slipping their cuffs, especially since they had done it in the past with that Africano, and since they had been caught a week before the actual incident. Apparently, when they were out in the day room getting rec time on another day, they slipped their cuffs and were running around the day room just to see, if they could do it, just as a test run for what they were planning. And everything worked out, but the CO that was in the tower, he seen them running around. So my point is these CO, they seen that they were slipping their cuffs. So my whole question was why did he think that they allowed them to come out when they knew that these guys were more prone to slipping the cuffs? Why didn't they improvise some kind of security or stop the day room program until they figured something out? And again, his words are crazy. His response was like, they allowed this to happen. But again, I'm gonna stay away from that part of it. I'm gonna let you guys hear him talk about it and put it in his own words. Anyways, with that being said, normally I just would have ran this interview. I would have played the phone call and let you guys hear the interview as it took place. But as the phone call progressed, again, some of the audio was kind of sketchy. There was a lot of lag time, and I had to tell him to repeat what he was saying on a couple of different occasions. So I wanted to give you guys the gist of it before I played the actual recording. And that's the reason why I chose to do it in this format. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. But either way, drop a comment and let me know what you think. Anyways, this guy Kill, he's gonna be calling me back. So if you guys got questions, follow-up questions that you guys want to ask, go ahead and drop them in the comments, and I'll do my best to ask as many of them as I can, and then I'll run a follow-up video on this story. Anyways, as always, I want to thank those of you who have continued to support the channel and those of you who have remained loyal viewers. You guys enjoy the rest of your week, stay pushing that positivity, and continue to stay tapped in, as I have another story that should be dropping shortly after this one. With that said, this is your boy B, and I'm gone.